Hey everyone, so this video is about the sidereal calendar and why it's going to come in handy quite a lot for the sacred secretion, because what does sidereal mean? It means of the stars. So if we want to know when the moon enters a particular star sign for the sacred secretion, it's very, very helpful to have a calendar that's super accurate to do that. And so I've been using a Vedic sidereal calendar, but there's all these different types of calendars that we have to know about so we can know the difference. So we've got a sidereal calendar, which is basically following the movement of the stars. And then we've got a solar calendar, which is following the movement of the sun, and a lunar calendar, which is following the movement of the moon, a solar lunar calendar, which is following the sun and the moon. And then there's, a solar lunar calendar or a lunar calendar following the sidereal system or the tropical system. And then there's different cultures with different types of arrangements and changes in between all of that. So there's many, many variations on calendars. And I've found over the years that I like to use the Vedic calendar on the Science of Light website, because they have a luni-solar calendar that is sidereal. So it's following the sun, it's following the moon, and it's following the stars. So it's kind of got everything all in one calendar, which makes it a little bit easier. Once you get to know it, there are Hindu words in there, which can make it a bit confusing, and it is very in-depth. And when we get into all of this stuff, with the sacred secretion, like look at all of these codexes. This is in-depth stuff doing the sacred secretion. We're not doing baby school, we're doing advanced. So to jump straight into advanced, it can be like really, really boggling, because each one of these codexes, it's unlimited kind of information and interpretation. So I'm not going to do interpretation for this video. I just want to present basic kind of facts, and then you can just do your own investigations and stuff like that. But I will show. So this is, if you go to the Science of Light website, this is my last year's calendar, you can get a planner calendar for free. And in there's actually a lot of information that you can learn about for free. So it's really, really great resource, which we'll get into a little bit of reading what they say in a little bit. So where will we start? We need to start somewhere. So I've got some diagrams. The large one, the medium one, and the small one, and then the months of the year and some numbers, which we'll get into, because it's all very, very confusing. Once you start getting into this, which I did, I'm like, oh my God, to understand that, I need to learn about that. And then to understand what I just learned about, I need to unpack it some more. And you really start going around all of these different resources, and then to put it all together, which I'm going to try and do here, it breaks your brain cells very much. So bear with me. I'll try and keep it as simple as possible, because I'm still learning, of course. I'm a sacred secretion practitioner. I'm a Chinese medicine practitioner. I have learned Ayurveda, but I'm not an astrologer. I'm not an astronomer, but I had to learn that stuff to be able to understand the sacred secretion process. And the stuff that I learned and put together is what the online course is about, which is, what this stuff is, kind of pulled out of the course in a different way, because I'm using a blackboard. In the course, I don't use the blackboard, I use PowerPoints. But this is stuff I think it's just important for everyone on the internet to know, because it does create a bit of controversy. So what we need to do first is understand the circle. Here we have a circle, and what is a circle in degrees? It's 360 degrees to go around the circle, and we live in a spiral galaxy, so it's doing like this or like this. So we're not actually doing circles when we're going, around in space-time, but this is kind of like the representation of that. So that's why we have to account for things like the wobble and the precession of the equinoxes, because we're not doing perfect circles. That's why things shift in all of these calendars. And that's why calendars exist, because we're doing the spiral, we're not doing a perfect circle. If we're doing a perfect circle, every month, every year would be exactly the same. And it's not. Like, we all know that every day is different. It's not the same. So that's why calendars exist. So the circle, we've got 0 to 360 divided on the cross, the Christ, the Jesus Christ. We've got 90 degrees, 180 and 270. And then when it comes to the zodiac, that circle gets divided into 12. And then there's more divisions. On that 0 to 90 degrees, we can divide each one into 30. 30, 30, 30 is 90. And then each one of those 30, it's divided into 10. So these are the degrees going around, right? So 360 degrees, all the divisions of that. So moving on to this circle system, I've got in the center one here, there's a circle with a little person standing like this, right? So in Qigong, we use that symbol. It's a Chinese glyph, and it's the human standing as the conduit between the heaven and the earth. And that's the points in the hands, the points in the feet, the crucifix position where the nails went, and that's how we connect to the heaven and the earth. And that's what we're doing in the microcosmic orbit. So we can connect our micro world of circulations and movements with the macro. So we can be in harmony as that human conduit to harmonize ourselves between the heavenly movements and the telluric or earthly currents. So we can be in harmony and of well health. It's kind of preventative care stuff as well. That's what a part of the sacred secretion is. So the human standing on the earth right there, this is called a geocentric model, which means that the center, the centric, is geo, which is the earth. So this makes sense to me only for the reason that I'm a human standing on the earth, looking at all of the stars and the sun and the moon from the earth. So that makes sense to me to understand these movements and everything, because that's what I see out of my eyeballs. That's the only reason I'm choosing that over the heliocentric model, because I don't know. And it's sort of like one of those circular arguments, because if all of the planets and everything is spiraling around each other, then it depends on what your focus is on what's spiraling what, right? So is this the sun going around the earth? Is the earth going around the sun? They're both going around each other, and that should be enough to worry about for now. Then the second circuit out, we've got the phases of the moon. So the moon in the geocentric model goes around the earth, and every time it goes around once, it takes a lunar month, which is 28.5-ish days. And how many times does it do that around a 360-degree circuit or a 365-day year? It does 13 times, 13 orbits of the moon, and that's the lunar system, the lunar calendar, 13 months, right? So then coming out from there, we've got the sun on its orbit around the earth, and that takes to do once 365 days-ish, depending on like leap years and all of the anomalies. So that's divided into 12 months that are based on the positions of the zodiac animals, because they are quite nicely equidistant to each other as the fixed star map, which is the constellations that we can see in this outer ring. That is basically, they say that there's 88 constellations. All cultures have slightly different interpretations of what those patterns form as shapes that they relate to as like archetypal pictures of animals or recognized forms, objects. And there's 88 of those. And then on the same kind of radial ring, we find the 12 zodiac. So those, when you think about it, they're quite good for navigation of the night sky, because if you know where those 12 are, then you can plug in the rest of those stars because they are fixed. They don't move in relationship with each other. They're always the same. So they're just going around, going around, going around. And for them to go around that circuit, it takes about 26,000 or so years, 25,800, something like that. And then when that is divided up into 12, we get the ages. And that is equaling about 2,160 years per age. So that's the basics. That's all I do with with the sacred secretion stuff for the online course as well. It's like, okay, that's enough to know right now. Okay, so now I want to define with Google, like this is not my information, this is just what we can pick out from the internet telling us what's the Vedic calendars all about. Veda information, where does it come from? How old is it? And then, where does the sidereal information come from? And then what's the tropical? And what's the difference, right? Because this is all about figuring out when the moon is in the star sign for the sacred secretion. So it says here, the Vedic calendar originated in ancient India during the Vedic era, likely around 7000 BC, developing from early observations of the sun, the moon, and the stars. It was a luni-solar calendar that incorporated lunar months with solar years, what we've just learned, incorporating nakshatras, which are the lunar constellations, which I'm not going to go into because I haven't really learned about that, but it's in that Science of Light website and downloadable planner. And using intercalary leap months to stay aligned with the seasons. The Vedas serve as the foundational text providing astronomical and scientific knowledge that forms the basis of the system. The calendar is rooted in observations of the natural cycles of the celestial bodies, including the sun's movement and the moon phases. Okay, so that's basically saying what we've already learned is that the Vedic calendar incorporates the moon, the sun, and the stars into one calendar, depending on different styles of calendars. They're all slightly different. Okay, so now looking at the description, brief description of the tropical zodiac as the basis for most Western astrology, dividing the year into 12 equal signs that align with the seasons, the solstices and the equinoxes, the seasons, the 4 seasons, beginning with Aries. This will be interesting once we get to there. Beginning with Aries at the spring equinox, rather than the actual star constellations. So they're aligning the zodiac with the seasons, but they're not looking at the stars. So that's the difference. It's pretty straightforward. Tropical is just looking at the movement of the sun, going around forming the seasons with the solstices and the equinoxes. The solstices are basically the high and low points of the sun over the year, closest to the earth, most furthest away, giving us summer and winter. And then the equinoxes, the day of equinox, equal night and day, is the balance point, the fulcrum, and the center of the 2 extremes of the sun. And, if we come back to this diagram here, and we can imagine as the sun moves around the earth and it gets closer and further away, this is what we've got as the Tropic of Capricorn and Cancer, and that's the equinox in the middle. And the tropical zodiac is just measuring how far the sun goes between the tropics, like that. So are you ready to break some brain cells now? We're going to learn about the difference between the tropical and the sidereal in a bit more depth, and how confusing calendars are in general when we've got these different wheels to follow. So on this diagram, this codex, we've got wheels within wheels. The central wheel, you can see there, it's got the months of the year, the 12 months, which is quite confusing in itself when we come down to this. This I've got mentioned in my online course as well, because it's just like, hey, what? Is this on purpose that they did this? Yes, probably. All right, January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. That's the end of the 12 months, and we recognize them from 1 to 12 based on New Year and New Year's Day, New Year's Eve, December 31st, New Year's Day, January the 1st. That's the beginning. That's the end of the year. But it's not, because that's a different system to measuring the spring equinox, which is what the old calendars have always been doing since the time of the Vedas, which is 7000 BC. So why are they doing that different? Well, that's the Gregorian calendar. And the really interesting anomaly about this is that the names of the month don't correspond to the month of the number that they've been given. So we all know that December is the 12th month, right? And January is the first month. And then if September is the 9th month, what does sept mean again? Oh, it means 7. What is October the 10th month? What does oct mean? Octagon? 8. What does Nov, the 11th month, mean? It means 9. Nov is 9. Decahedron, the 12th month, is 10. So we can see that this is very confusing, probably on purpose, to get us completely out of sync with what is actually happening in the heavens above, right? So that's the first thing to get our heads around. So then, when it comes up to putting it into here, it's almost a bit arbitrary. These names that are all based on, Roman Empire personas. Then, looking at the months of the year, we've got when the sun moves into a particular star sign, it relates to the month. But we're all taught to believe with the calendar, which is, the Gregorian calendar. It's based on what we'll learn about later in the Science of Light presentation, on civil needs. That's what he says, which is basically, things that happen to run a corporation, run a town, run your people. Everyone, it needs to be a regular thing. They wanted it to regulate the calendar that, is an irregular calendar. The lunisolar movement is irregular, as we'll see. So the Gregorian calendar came in to kind of make a regular system out of it all, which then means that it never quite makes sense, basically. So then, if we've got to unprogram ourselves from, the beginning of the month is the beginning of the month. The beginning of the month is related to when the sun moves into the month. It always happens in the middle of the month, and that's what the tropical and sidereal agree on. Although the tropical calendar, when the sun moves into the particular month, it's always on the same date. And when we look at the sidereal, that date is fluctuating, but it's still around, the 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th central position of the month. So when the sun moves into the month, it's when the sun moves into the star sign, which happens in the middle of the month. Confused yet? Let's have a look at another chart up close. So this is one I made, which is the same as the board, which is basically, you can see on the outer ring there is the constellations, the 12 zodiac. The colourful rainbow is the arbitrary months of the year. And sticking out from the month, you see the line of division dividing one zodiac sign shares 2 months either side. So when the sun, that's an S for solstice, by the way, when the sun moves into December, around the middle of December, it's moved into this constellation. And when it moves into the next constellation, it happens in the middle of that month. So we've got wheels within wheels within wheels. And then you can see here I've just marked out S and S for solstice, and then E and E for equinox. And the tropical calendar's following the position of the sun, aligning with the equinoxes. And the sidereal calendar, it doesn't actually worry about the equinoxes and the solstices, but when we're doing the sacred secretion, I quite like to know when the solstices and equinoxes are happening. So then, in essence, with the sacred secretion, we can combine both calendars to have all the information, 2 different systems following different things. We combine it together. Sidereal is great for tracking the stars. The solar is, acknowledging the solstice and the equinoxes, which I find to be actually very powerfully energetic in different ways kind of days. I find the equinoxes to be like this of discharging energy, and the solstices to be like this building kind of energy. And you build that energy from solstice and then discharge it at the equinox because you're building energy in your circuitry system. I've described that a little bit in my books and the online course, but I'll do another video on that as well to show that the movement from the solstice to the equinox is actually showing up in the Neidan and Alchemy Taoist 3 stages, which I've described in my 3rd episode of my online mysticism school, which we're going to get into in greater depth in the school as well. So you can see what I'm trying to do here is like take all of the pieces out of all of the information codexes and put them together and see what matches for the sacred secretion. So coming back to this codex, just so we can get our heads around it, same as this one. Here is in yellow the solstice, here is the equinox, here is the months, here is the zodiac animals, and when we can see that the zodiac sign of Sagittarius, it's sharing the month of December and January. Scorpio is sharing November and the beginning of December, and on we go around like that. So now we're going to have a look at this sidereal Vedic calendar lunisolar planner, and it doesn't have page numbers, but I'm on this page. 2 zodiacs and precession. Okay, so the important factor to understand is that the rising star position on the spring equinox changes over time, and it's called precession. So just to say that why we're going to be focusing on this, the rising star for the spring equinox, because that is basically what's under debate. And this is what makes the big change between the tropical and the sidereal systems, is that the sidereal system is following the stars as they're moving around the heavens, and the tropical system basically aligns with a moment in time that has not kept on following the stars in the sky. So, and yeah, we'll get into the reason why for that as well. And so the importance of the spring equinox is basically they're marking the beginning of the seasonal year, springtime. Springtime is when everything comes back to life again after the death of winter. The birth of Jesus, it's Easter time, all of that kind of natural phenomenon associated with all of the religious stuff. And, you know, in the past with the religious stuff, they always wanted to align their religious ceremonies with the spring equinox, you know, like Easter. So that's why it has been sort of changed over the years to always make it fit with the agricultural cycles or the springtime. And the real debate around it is that the tropical people say that when the spring equinox occurs, it always occurs in the zodiac sign of Aries at 0 degrees Aries, and the sidereal people, noticing that the stars are moving, have tracked it back in time and to present day, and therefore they can do it forward in time based on all of these, you know, ancient calculators. And they've shown that the spring equinox is now rising in Pisces. So that means we're in the age of Pisces, not in the age of Aries, and we're moving towards the age of Aquarius, which he says in his video that we should hit that in about 450 years. So the tropical one is saying that we're still in Aries when we're not, basically. So, you know, it's interesting. So the spring equinox point is slowly moving backwards through the zodiac, which is going this way. And it moves about 1 degree every 72 years. So remember the degrees on here, you know, 0 degrees to 90 degrees. It moves one of those every 72 years. So this is the source of many debates. Does the zodiac begin wherever the spring equinox is located, or does it begin based on a stellar position, a star position? It depends. I mean, all of this stuff depends. No one's right or wrong. It just depends on your perspective and what you know at the time. What you don't know, and what you choose to put in or out of your belief system is kind of, creative. So since this is an area of great debate, every view is colored by a certain bias. It is impossible to not have any bias, as we all have a background which gives meaning to what we perceive. While we cannot remove our bias, we can at least be aware of it. I am an inclusivist. I believe that if the fundamental aspects or archetypes of any system relate to reality, then in whatever culture they evolve within, they will be able to correlate to the same archetypes in another culture. In this way, I see everything that has evolved as serving a purpose. That stated, I proceed to speak of the evolution of the zodiacs and precession in the most unbiased way I possibly can. So that's the author stating his position. So looking at the ancient text, we see the Vedic references to the spring equinox being located in the stars of the Pleiades, which is interesting because this is what the Māori people of New Zealand, they call it Matariki, and that's when the sun moves into the Pleiades. This is the new year for the Māori people, which is a megalithic sort of age teaching or belief system. And so the spring equinox being located in the place of Pleiades, Aries, which is the beginning of Taurus. So Pleiades is the beginning of Taurus. See the first zodiac image, which is this and which is down here. So they've got on this chart that the time they're talking about is 2600 BC. And they got their information from the ancient Vedic text, and they were saying that the spring equinox alignment was the star system of Pleiades, which is near Taurus, beginning of Taurus, which is at 10 degrees Taurus. So that's what it would look like there, juxtaposed with Aries and 0 degrees for tropical, juxtaposed with sidereal in the year 2000 at 6 degrees in Pisces. So this is the past, and this is the now. And then in the future, it's going to keep going around like that. In Hellenist sources, we see references to the spring equinox at 10, 8, and 0 degrees of Aries. So that's 0 degrees of Aries. So we can see this little section here, that's Aries, and the 0 degrees marks the borderline between Aries and Pisces. So that occurred, they've got it here on their map in their book at 290 AD, or they've got CE, same thing. And they said that it comes from Hellenist sources, and the Hellenist sources, I looked it up, it says it's around 323 BC, and that's in the time of Alexander the Great and Cleopatra. So basically, that's quite a while ago. That's what we're seeing from that alignment with 0 degrees in Aries. So according to the calculations accepted by the government of India, the spring equinox was at 0 degrees of Aries in 290 CE, which we just learned. And when we look at the 290 CE zodiac, which is on this, we see that the sign of Aries lines up exactly with the spring equinox. So that's when it was aligned. From the spring equinox to the summer solstice, depending on your hemisphere, is divided into 3 parts. 1, 2, 3. 3 zodiac divisions. And each correlate to a sign of the zodiac. These 3 parts each correlate to approximately 1 month of 30 days each. But it doesn't begin at the beginning of the numbered month, 1 January, 30 January. It starts in the middle and moves to the middle of the next month. In the 26,000 BC zodiac, BC, Aries is before the equinox, and the constellations and portions of seasons do not line up. In the 290 CE zodiac, Aries is directly after the equinoxes and lines up with the seasons. Now, of course, that's a little bit hard to show on this diagram, which is, I can't move it. I can't move these wheels around and line that one up in that disc and that disc and that disc, because it's just a blackboard. So you have to get your head around as well, like seeing that these different wheels, if you could move them around, then you can understand what's happening here a little bit better, right? Now, it says, Claudius Ptolemy, 100 to 170 CE, wrote one of the most influential books on astronomy and astrology of the ancient world, in which he defined 0 degrees of Aries starting at the spring equinox. So that means, you know, what I just said with the moving wheels, discs, we'd have to move that equinox down to there for it to be lining up with 0 degree Aries, just to make sense in your mind. But the picture, for it is in this book. Many schools of astrology all over the ancient world, including India, used this as the demarcation for Aries. Not everyone used it, but it became a very popular methodology for the next 800 years. Looking at the present zodiac on the next page, we can see that the present spring equinox is at 6 degrees of sidereal Pisces. Sidereal meaning of the stars. Here it is here. That's 6 degrees of Pisces, which is that little dotted line there. Here's the borderline between Pisces and Aquarius. And that's 6 degrees of Pisces, showing that the current equinox, if we follow the stars, is lining up with Pisces, not Aries, whatever. And then it's continuing to move backwards at 1 degree every 72 years. Yep, we learned that. What Ptolemy did was separate the constellations from the sky and attach them to the seasons. So that's the really key point with it all. The constellations were just kind of pulled out, frozen in time, and attached to the solstices and the equinoxes, and they're no longer part of the moving sky wheel. They're just more like labels for seasons to do with making the calendar more regular, so that civil events and you know, celebrations and stuff could just be at the same time every year without it moving around. Movable feast, it's a bit more annoying. I mean, the Hebrew calendar is completely movable like that, and so is the Muslim and Islamic calendar, but this calendar isn't. As the stars continued to move, those using Ptolemy continued to call the 30 days after the spring equinox as Aries, even though it did not correlate to the stars of Aries anymore. So that's the whole big deal. So that's the answer. The system that calculates the spring equinox as the beginning of Aries was called tropical, pertaining to the celestial tropics, which is Capricorn and Cancer, and the sun going up and down between those two high and low points to do with the globe. Well, I shouldn't say to do with, oh God, the earth? What do you say these days? I don't know. I don't want to get into the shape of the earth. So in Sanskrit, it is called sayana, meaning sa meaning with, and ayana meaning the equinoxes. Sayana, with the equinoxes. So the tropical means with the equinoxes. The tropical system basically kept the seasonal positions and stellar nomenclature of the 290 CE zodiac as the standard. So that's a moment in time, and for some mysterious reason it hasn't shifted on from there. The system that calculated the exact star position of the spring equinox and used the exact star position of planets is called sidereal, pertaining to the stars, and in Sanskrit it's called nirayana, meaning without the equinoxes. In the most ancient texts, we find reference to the sidereal system. In the most ancient text, we find reference to the sidereal system. After Alexander the Great, we see reference to both sidereal and tropical systems being used in India. The use of the tropical system stops in India by about the 10th or 11th century. It's a detriment when people say Vedic astrology and think there was only one system. Through the Vedic text, we see that there were multiple systems in various locations from Iran to Thailand and Bali, where I live, as well as different styles even within the same locations. So, you know, I'm in Bali. It's in Indonesia, which has like over 7,000 islands. And the greater nation of Indonesia is Islam belief system, Islamic or Christian or Catholic. And just tiny little Bali is Hindu and Buddhist, mostly Hindu. And everyone is doing a Hindu calendar, which is on a 6-month repeat. So they're following the sun and the moon and the stars, but in their system as well. Within, you know, a great country that's following a completely different system. So you can see how this gets very, very mixed up for the entire world. We're all on different calendars. The difference between the two systems, which is basically this difference here, is called the Ayana Masar portion varied from the equinox. Portion of equinox variant. The tropical zodiac is sometimes called the Western zodiac, but this is a misnomer, as there are Western astrologers who use the sidereal zodiac. There are also Vedic astrologers who use a tropical zodiac. Therefore, proper terminology is tropical Sayana and sidereal Nirayana, with or without the equinoxes. Okay, so I wanted to talk a bit about, you know, this whole anomaly. And I found this out when I was writing my book series, actually, that it's the Pope Gregorian calendar reform of 1582. You know, obviously it's after 290, the Hellenistic period of Alexander the Great and Cleopatra. It's after that period, almost 1,200 to 300 years, that they were noticing that this was shifting. They didn't know what to do. They wanted to get it back to fitting into their civil calendar. So they just minused some days to sandwich it back together, to close the gap, basically. And this is what they did. You can look this up. There was no spring equinox on October the 10th, October the 8th month, or the 10th month, the 10th of the 10th. It's kind of interesting, Io, which is the Māori god, before Rangi and Papa, before male and female. Io, Matua Kore, is the creation god. And that's the analemma of the sun. If you put a stick in the ground and you measure the shadow over the course of a year, that is what will present as the analemma, the movement of the sun, passing from its highest to lowest point through the equinox. So there was no spring equinox on October the 10th in 1583, because the Gregorian calendar reform, which reset the calendar to align with the spring equinox, had already occurred. 10 days were skipped in October 1582, the year before, making the day after October the 4th, October the 15th. They ate 10 days from the 10th, not 10th month, in 1582, so by the time it rolled over to 1583, it just disappeared. Therefore, October the 5th through October the 14th, 1582 did not exist. Magic. In the calendar for the countries that had adopted the Gregorian reform immediately. So October the 10th of the following year was a normal calendar day. And it goes on to say, the problem, the Julian calendar used for centuries had a slight inaccuracy in calculating the length of a solar year, and that led to this gradual drift. And then the solution, Pope Gregory the VIII introduced the Gregorian calendar to correct it. So that's pretty much all it says. So that's what has stayed the same since then. So that's all it is. It's just wanting to basically align the name of the month and the name of the zodiac with the position of the equinox, but it's not actually what's happening in real time. So, make of that what you will, but it's very important, I think, especially for this anomaly that I found out. It's in the book Raising Christos. It's called the lunar peak. One of my friends told me about this, which was, I've written it down. So I'm just going to read a little bit out of my book on this. Basically, the lunar peak, they say, it's the time when a woman can release a second egg. So, everyone knows, most people know the menstrual cycle of the female, and then at the 14th day, or the midway point of that cycle, the egg is released, and if it's not fertilized, then half a cycle later it's going to be released from the body as the menstrual fluids. And so what this doctor discovered while he was trying to help Catholic women not get more pregnant, he discovered by tracking their natal charts that there was a bit of an anomaly occurring, and I'm going to read what I found out. So there's a quote here by Delene Barton. The lunar biorhythmic cycle is a calculation of the natal angle phase of the moon at the time of the woman's birth. This curiosity was noted by a Czech gynecologist, a psychiatrist named Dr. Eugene Jonas in 1958, who was researching how to assist Catholic women wishing to avoid pregnancy. As the doctor was also a researcher of astrology and cosmology, he began to study the patterns of his clients' conception dates. He came to the conclusion that a woman is most fertile when the sun and moon are at the relative angle to her zodiac sign every month at the exact time of her birth. As this occurs in a rhythm often not harmonized with the menstrual cycle, two distinct windows of fertility are presented. As his work was based in astrology, he was met with skepticism from other practitioners, despite having an 85% success rate at preventing pregnancy through abstinence and observance of this cosmological happening. Today, the lunar biorhythmic cycle is used by many practitioners to help women fall pregnant in a day and age of low fertility. So that's really, really interesting, don't you think? Because that's the woman saving the seed. When the moon comes into the star sign, you can release, if you're a lady, you can release a second egg, which means also it's even more important to save that seed and not engage in sexual activities unless you want to get pregnant. So you can use it either way. It's quite an amazingly beautiful tool to know about. If you want to become pregnant, you can use the sacred secretion to enhance that. And if you don't want to become pregnant, you have to know this because there's the off chance that you could get pregnant even if you're tracking your normal menstrual cycle. So, it's got many branches far and wide for learning the teaching of the sacred secretion, I must say. And so now I want to look into, I'm going to do a little clip from the Science of Light teacher, and then I'm just going to show the difference between the calendars, just so you can see with your own eyes.
In order to understand the Vedic calendar, we have to understand the calendar that we're using right now. Most people assume that that's just the way it is, that that's just time. And they're using that as if it's a given, not questioning who said that today is October 23rd. Like, who said that it's October? Who said that it's the 23rd? And what does that actually mean? And it actually doesn't mean anything. And the fact that it doesn't mean anything is connects us with nothing. And by connecting us with nothing, we are lost to time. when we understand the Vedic calendar, we are actually looking at real cycles of time. Things that are creating the change that makes the universe happen. And that change, because every day is different, that change, we can calculate the quality of that change. And to be aware, to be in touch with that changing quality of time is connecting us to the universe. So we can deepen our relationship to the universe, the solar system, the planet, and our own internal being, which is reflected within that system by understanding the Vedic calendar. It's much more powerful than using some date that means nothing. Huge difference. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about is everybody always wants to know why their sun sign is different in the Vedic realm. And for understanding the calendar, it doesn't matter what your sun sign is, because we're not going to be doing astrology. We're actually going to be doing astronomy. The Vedic calendar is astronomical, and it's only astrology. Astrology is the interpreting what that astronomical material is, what it means. And we're not going to be looking at, what it means on a, does it make me good at this or bad at that, which is what's classically we call personal astrology. We're going to be looking at it much more as a, what are these big astronomical cycles mean for the function of reality? But there is the difference. The fact that the sun signs are different will make a difference in how we calculate months. Because right now, presently, we're using January, February, March, April, May. And do you know what those are based on? Roman emperors. And a particular Roman emperor named Julius Caesar. And Julius Caesar was tired of dealing with the priests and the lunar calendar, and so he made a fixed calendar that didn't change. And the fixed calendar had a wonderful aspect of it's regular. It's very set and regular, not like a lunar calendar that's always changing. And so it had this awesome aspect, but what did he base it on? And what did he base the start on? He had one of his astrologers pick the date, and he picked it based upon a lunar calendar date, and then just kept it as that. And it began to move because time is not perfect, and the calendar started to shift, and then it shifted so much that later it had to be reformed, and it was reformed by Pope Gregor. So it started with the Roman emperors, and it ended with Pope Gregor. And so the present calendar that we use is called the Gregorian calendar. So it's a Christian Pope created calendar. And if we were Catholic, we could say that it was divine authority that made it, but that still doesn't connect us to anything actually happening in reality.
Right, so I just want to add this little bit in to make it more clear about how your birth sign might change, switching from tropical to sidereal, which I did. I switched from a Scorpio to a Libra, so I'm going to show you why that is. So on the diagram, you can see there's two arrows. The first arrow we'll talk about is the one that's facing right, pointed between the border of Pisces and Aries on that inner ring of the 12 zodiac. And then to the outside, in that second ring, you can see next to Pisces I've got Aries, next to Aries I've got Taurus, next to Taurus I've got Gemini, and you would continue it all the way around. So it's showing that the sun signs are changing one click on the dial because of the holding the spring equinox back in time at 0 degrees Aries when the Pope Gregory sandwiched 10 days from October in 1582. So that's basically held us back in time, and it's not tracking the true position of what constellation is lining up with the rising sunrise on the equinox. The rising sun on the equinox is now rising in the constellation of Pisces, but if it rises in the constellation of Aries, everything gets shifted. So that's kind of the difference. So what we can do now is look to the other arrow where I've got it pointed at the very end of October, if you can see it there. So that's the 27th, which is my date of October. And you will see that it is falling into the zodiac region of Libra. So if I had continued that writing all the way around and followed on the outer ring Aries, Taurus, Gemini, then it would go Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, and then Scorpio would line up with Libra. So that's how I've changed. So yeah, there's a good natal chart that I've got on. I've put it into my Telegram group, and I'll put it up here again, that you can find out your whole sidereal chart when you plug in your birth date. So I hope that makes sense now. And now we're going to look at moon tracks, which is a moon tracker that I used to use for the sacred secretion, but it's based on the tropical calendar. Tracking the moon with the tropical calendar, which means that everything's out one click on the dial. And then we're going to compare that to what I use now, which is where that science of light information comes from, and have a look at their website. And just so we can get our head around on the sidereal, when the moon moves into your sun sign, it will be about 2.5 days to, or 52 hours-ish different to the other one. So then it's up to you to tune into it and feel and use your logic and reasoning to decide for yourself. Okay, so first I want to show us moontracks.com. You can see it up there. Monthly moon phase. There's a lot of ads. It never used to be like this. I haven't used this for a few years. If you can see here in this golden sidebar, if you go to the top one, 2025 astro moon phases. And now it's opening up the calendar. So you can see here it's got January to December of the arbitrary months. We're in October now. And I just want to take us through just real quickly. So you can see there, Wednesday the 1st of October, it's got the moon. And then it's saying, you know, by the image of the moon, what phase it's in. And then it's saying Capricorn moving to Aquarius. And then by Thursday the 2nd, the moon is now fully Aquarius. And then by Friday the 3rd, waxing gibbous, still in Aquarius. And then by Saturday the 4th, moving from Aquarius now into Pisces. So that whole phase, it really depends on, you know, did it moved from Capricorn to Aquarius on late Wednesday night, early Thursday morning, and then when it left, did it leave early Saturday morning? There's all these different things timing-wise to figure out. What I figured out in all the research for the book writing is that it's generally 52 hours, 2.5-ish days to 3 days sometimes, from star sign to star sign of the moon. So if we do the next one, we've gone Aquarius to Pisces, Saturday the 4th, at some time. This calendar doesn't have any times either, so it's not very accurate. Then on the 5th of Sunday, it's in Pisces. And then you can see on Monday the 6th, it's going from Pisces to Aries. So you can just start seeing that that's the rhythm that builds for that. And then you can go through month by month. So what do we want to take notice of here? If we just use October the 1st as our measurement, 1st and the 2nd, we're really seeing that it's all about Aquarius. So let's just keep that in mind, make it really easy. The beginning of October is all about the moon moving into Aquarius. And so now we're going to do a comparison. If we go to this website, which is the Science of Light people that we've just met their work, This Deva.guru is their electronic calendar site. If you go to scienceoflight.net or vedicplanner.com, that's where you can get the printable planner, which I love doing that because I'm such a kinesthetic learner. I love drawing and making charts and everything. And that's what I use with their permission. I emailed them to see if I could use it for my online course, and they were really delighted to allow that. So if you want the paper one, go to those websites. And then if you just want to do quick checks and look up online, you can do it here. Wow, doesn't that all look confusing? Don't worry, just go to this little tab called Pachang. And here we are. And, you can put your time zone here. I can be more accurate there with my time zone. And what are we looking at? So remember, we're going to start with October the 1st, Wednesday. And we can see that there's times, exact times in the red writing. And we can see that what it says here, it says Virgo 15, Virgo 16, Virgo 17, Virgo 18. That is the days of the solar month when the sun has... It's in Virgo until it gets up to the middle of the month. Okay, so we can see here that on Friday the 17th, we've gone from Virgo 31, the last day of the month for Virgo, and then it transitions into Libra. So that's that midway point of the month. So that's the sun. The movement of the sun is in these positions here, and then because the moon moves more quickly, it's every few days. So what we can see on Wednesday the 1st is that at 16:54, the moon moves into CP. What is CP? Capricorn. The moon moves into Capricorn, which is not Aquarius. So the moon moving into Capricorn, and then the next day, you just track it down. The MO, the moon, is not doing anything. What's this ME? That's Mercury. Don't worry about all that. I'm not. And then Friday the 3rd, you can see at 23:55, the moon is now moving into Aquarius. So just to juxtapose going back, Wednesday the 1st, and then that's into Aquarius, and then on the 3rd, probably on the late night of the 3rd, early morning Saturday, that's when the shift is happening. So you can see the shifts are the same, because this is just before midnight, so that could be, on either day really. So you can see that the shifts of the phase changes when the moon enters the star sign are happening at the same times-ish. It's just happening into a different star sign because we know that the tropical calendar is not measuring the stars, it's measuring the stars as they would be if it was still, 290 AD. That's it. So I hope that makes sense. It's a really, really great resource. You can read all about all of this stuff in greater detail in the planner that you can download on their website for free. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope it's been informative. I know it's a lot to get our heads around. Believe me, I've been doing it for a while, and it's still, I need little refresher courses like this to really solidify it in my mind. But if you want to learn more about this, especially for using it all for your sacred secretion and finding out when is the moon coming into my sign and how to plan it all and do all of that, I've made an 11-hour online course teaching all of this. So here's the evidence, here's the proof, here's the reasoning, why I'm using this in the online course. And I made it just basically to answer the question of can you teach me when the moon comes into my star sign? And I'm like, yeah, but it's really quite detailed, and that's why it deserves an online course teaching all of, the stuff we've discussed in this video already. So yeah, I encourage you to have a look at that and look at my books and my online school of mysticism. which is basically, just layers and layers and layers, building on all of this amazing connections between the cosmology and the Taoist and alchemy, and what's found in Ireland, and how we can sort of use that to clear our cognitive dissonance about what happened to the Bible and spirituality, all because of Rome. They always pop up, don't they? Anyway, that's enough for now. See you.